Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have another fantabulous show for you today. We're just having so much fun in all this Arctic weather. I truly am enjoying it.
I can't believe that you are downplaying it in this way. You're kind of like joking about it.
It's nothing.
Serious.
It continues to be nothing.
So I'll tell you, I walked over around outside yesterday, and it was like sheets and blocks of ice. I had on big snow boots, and I was almost falling all over the place.
I went for a walk yesterday afternoon.
And you had a nice stroll?
I had a lovely stroll. I skipped. I was jolly.
You're lucky that your area was plowed. Some people are still suffering. And
it'll be 2.5 minutes to get to work today. We'll have it down to 90 seconds tomorrow because nobody else is driving. It's great.
Coming up on Rising, TikTok users are saying that anti-ICE videos are being censored.
Plus, President Trump says the DOJ and Congress are, quote, looking at Representative Ilhan Omar.
And Washington Post reporters are publicly asking Jeff Bezos to not lay them off after reports of massive cuts to the outlet. But first, Robbie, what's on your radar?
Well, you can probably guess what we're talking about here. Now, look, it's time to get serious. President Donald Trump is deploying border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota, probably to clean up the mess some other members of the administration, unfortunately, are making. Trump writes on Truth Social, I am sending Tom Homan to Minnesota tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough, but fair, and will report directly to me. Trump apparently listened when Brian Kilmeade made this very suggestion on Fox News, and it's a good one. Take a look.
What I would do is just bring Tom Homan in. Tom Homan's been marginalized. Go in there. Tom Homan's got credibility on the left. He was Barack Obama and Jay Johnson's main guy. He's got credibility, obviously, on the right. He met Donald Trump when Donald Trump started running for president and loved his philosophy on the border and sealed the border. But where's he been? He should go in there, meet with the mayor and governor, and go in there and take charge. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards. There's no more experienced person. He's got the president's trust, but for some reason he's been marginalized in the Minneapolis operation.
Now, the background to all this is that behind the scenes, there's tremendous frustration among immigration enforcement officers and other Republican officials with the job that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is doing. Under her leadership, immigration enforcement has focused on areas where there's maximum non-compliance from local Democratic authorities. So you can argue these are necessary fights that the administration is picking, but Tom Homan prefers to actually accomplish the job of deporting large numbers of criminal illegal aliens. So maybe it's time to give his approach a shot. Noem, on the other hand, and others, keep making claims they can't back up about the motivations, for instance, of Alex Preddy, who was killed during an altercation with Customs and Border Enforcement over the weekend. Noem and others made the false claims that just carrying a gun is illegal during a protest or during an encounter with law enforcement, which obviously is not true. I can't emphasize that enough. Apparently, Trump is getting fatigued with all this unnecessary controversy. Conservative radio star Eric Erickson wrote on X that he had a, quote, late-night phone call with a senior White House official. Tells me the president's not happy with how the Department of Homeland Security has handled the response to the incident. Now, I'm glad to hear it, because the fact of the matter is that this incident has not been handled well. As I explained yesterday in my radar, it's shameful that anyone in the administration would consider tossing out the Second Amendment, our cherished gun rights, in order to find an excuse not to scrutinize the actions of one specific law enforcement agent. Moreover, we need an impartial investigation. We can't trust what video evidence appears to show us, and apparently we can't trust what certain top officials are going to say. We need to be sober-minded and fair. If there's a justification for the use of force against Preddy or against Renee Good, okay, there's justification. I can't tell from the videos, and if you think you're absolutely certain, you're seeing what you want to see. Now, the administration has a short window to restore confidence in their operations, which they absolutely must do. The American people voted for Trump to carry out deportations of illegal immigrants. No way around it, especially those who are gang members and fraudsters and a net drain on their communities. They did not vote for and will not tolerate a permanent new police state where American citizens are killed with impunity, and then the administration turns around and lies about the circumstances and motivations of those killings. We demand better from the people running our country. They won't always get everything right, I understand that, but we need to have faith that they are trying and that our liberties, our First and Second Amendment rights, will never be violated. If we lose those, then we really don't have a country anymore. So, Lindsey, a big shakeup is coming to the Minnesota operations. Tom Homan is in. Bovino is out. He is being sent into retirement, effectively.
Yeah. cut off all access to his social media.
Yeah, because he keeps fighting with people on social media.
And Childish when someone died. Yeah.
Right. And again, this is not the same thing as saying the death was a murder and that the person who did it is guilty. I do not know. We do not know the circumstances. They need to be investigated. They need to be looked at. The people in the administration should just say it is a tragedy that someone got killed, and we are evaluating the circumstances to determine if it was correct to use lethal force or not. We don't want anyone interfering with law enforcement, but of course you can carry a gun consistent with concealed carry rules, and of course you can protest, and we put the blame on Democrats who are not coordinating with us. That is the statement to make. But they keep getting over their skis and saying, well, domestic terrorist, it's a domestic terrorist. Everyone's a domestic terrorist now. We have broadened that concept in a manner that it is no longer useful. So bring in Tom Homan, sort this out. Trump had a great call with Tim Walz, apparently.
Finally.
I was glad to see it, where it sounds like there was some compromising where, okay, they will assist, maybe, we'll work with Tom Homan to assist in holding on to illegal immigrants who have other crimes. That is the middle ground I have called for all along. That's what I said Virginia had been doing under Glenn Youngkin, a great governor. Abigail Spanberger got rid of that immediately, even though she's a moderate Dem. Fine, not good. But that is what Democrats should be doing, to work with Republicans to do immigration enforcement of the people we are most determined to get rid of. That's what Tom Homan wants to do, and I think it's the right approach. So I think this is all very good, and I'm hoping we see a de-escalation of some of these conflicts that are. And it's not like, well, you just get to interrupt law enforcement and then that's it. They're going to pull back. That's not exactly the case. But we don't need to have excessive. We don't need to go out of our way to create chaotic moments where people are getting hurt.
Yeah, I think that what the last few days showed us is that the president and the administration is now looking for an off-ramp, the de-escalation that people were calling for, because they understand this has become and turned into a PR disaster. When we look at the way
a lot of
it's
Republicans defecting. Yes.
Yeah, and also the responses, and if you just look at Caroline Leavitt, she was speaking to reporters yesterday, and reporters kept asking the question in a variety of ways of, do you agree with the statements that Kristi Noem, Bovino, Stephen Miller are making?
And she said did not say she did.
She's like, the president is waiting to see it. So the
Right.
president is taking the measured approach that the only federal official that we really heard that from was Tom Homan the first time when Renee Good was killed. And to say that Tom Homan is somebody who we're looking at as moderate when his policies on immigration are very adamant and he wants migrants out of the country, illegal migrants, but he is somebody who's going to go in there and say, well, the job is the job. The job is not aggressive tactics against Americans. The job is not to see Americans die. The job is not to tell people they can't have their First or Second Amendment rights. His tactic is really to look at people who are already criminals or on their last leg of being here and really like give your last final order of deportation, and let's see why you've extended your stay this long. And I think not all the people that are in between trying to figure out how to get permanent citizenship that are contributing to society, not the factory workers that are contributing to society. And so this is a good step. And also it's a great step that I've been saying over and over again, that the local leaders speak to the federal leaders. When we saw Vance go all the way to Minnesota and not speak to any local leaders, I thought that that was childish, no matter who makes the first step forward. So the fact that Walz did reach out to the president, which again, kudos to him for making that phone call or asking for that phone call. Now they can have a dialogue that actually gets us a step forward, because talking on TV and berating one another wasn't getting us anywhere besides having two people killed within a certain amount of weeks between one another.
Yeah. There really is a split in approach that you were getting at, which I've emphasized before, between Stephen Miller and Tom Homan. And in fact, the reporting was that Stephen Miller had yelled at Tom Homan's people previously, had a fight with them, because he's like, why are we not, this is Stephen Miller's perspective, why are we not going to Home Depot parking lots and just mass arresting everyone? And what Tom Homan wanted to do was go into the states that are supportive of federal immigration authorities being there and do mass deportations of people who are already being held for other crimes. And then you would make a significant dent in the population, whereas Stephen Miller wants to do it on unwilling law enforcement personalities and do more of a, sweeping neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
And I think this is not the final solution, but this is a step in the right direction.
Well, don't say that.
No, I mean, instead of hearing the president say he wants to invoke the Insurrection Act, instead of hearing the governor say that he wants to call the National Guard on ICE, this is the first time that we're hearing, okay, bringing the temperature down, which is what both sides of the aisle have been calling for, and I think necessary. A letter from Pam Bondi causing some Democrats to issue warnings about this year's elections. We'll be right back. Attorney General Pam Bondi seemingly demanding that Minnesota hand over the state's voter rolls after federal immigration officers shot and killed an American citizen for the second time this month. In a letter to Governor Tim Walz, Bondi outlined 3 steps he should take to, quote, restore the rule of law in the state amid ongoing ICE operations and the subsequent protests.
Bondi asked that the governor first share all of the state's records on Medicaid and food nutrition services to allow the feds to investigate the fraud claims there, and then he said that they should repeal the sanctuary city policies in the Twin Cities. But it was the third action that she listed that's catching attention here in Washington. She also asked the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ to be allowed to access the state voter rolls to, quote, confirm that Minnesota's voter registration practices comply with federal law. Here was Bondi explaining that letter on Fox.
I do not understand these people. We sent Governor Walz a very strong letter today. We had been working on this letter. We got it out saying that he better support President Trump. He better support the men and women in law enforcement, because if he doesn't, we are. And that's what we're doing right now.
Were there any consequences in this letter?
Well, we'll see. This is fluid. Let's see how Governor Walz responds.
This is not the first time the Trump administration has attempted to get their hands on state voter rolls. Last year, the DOJ began trying to build the largest set of national voter roll data ever from all 50 states. 11 of those states complied. Minnesota repeatedly declined to turn over their rolls, citing a state law preventing the transfer of private information.
But Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar seems to think Bondi's renewed focus on voter rolls is indicative of something bigger. Omar posted on X, quote, ICE will leave Minnesota if you hand over your voter rolls. Tells you everything you need to know. This was never about immigration or fraud. It was always about rigging elections. It's important to note that in no place in the letter did Bondi explicitly promise ICE would leave Minnesota or stop operations if Walz complied with the letter, but many Democrats echoed Omar's concern. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego writing in his own post, that's a shakedown. They're using fear to get their hands on voter information. In America, you don't get to strong arm your way into elections. And Senator Chris Murphy doubled down. Check it out.
This has never been about public safety. Minneapolis is a much less safe place today because ICE is there. This is likely about trying to rig and steal the election. Donald Trump is wildly unpopular. He is not committed to democracy. And he knows the only way that his movement is to retain power, the only way that his corporate allies retain power, his billionaire allies retain power this November, is for Trump to steal the election.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is not about rigging the election. This is about making sure the election is not rigged. This is about making sure the people voting are eligible to vote, are not voting multiple times, and are not illegal immigrants. And the reason we have those questions is because there's a massive fraud underway in the state, and the state can't be counted on to collect proper information and to make sure the right people are getting the right welfare and health care and all of those kinds of things, the non-aid from the government in form of the COVID payments. So that's why they want the information. That seems perfectly valid to me and a bit telling that Democrats are going to set their hair on fire over what? Over that?
It's not odd that people are looking at President Trump, the same person that denies the legitimacy of an entire election continuously in 2020 and says, oh, what is the inclination here? Even though he still won't stand there today and say that he lost the election and wants more information. So this is somebody who has perpetuated unsubstantiated claims, now wants access to information. I was reading the New York Times, and this is a highly unusual request, mostly because this is the thing that's assigned to states. They don't have to turn this over. You're going to give over driver's license numbers, social security numbers, sensitive personal identities, which we know can be used in any type of way to determine how the president feels about
They want to
attacking
make
certain.
sure they're eligible voters.
No, that's not the. But you just want to trust Trump at his word. He's shown us time and time again that his administration should not always be trusted.
No,
at
I
its
want
word.
to not just trust Minnesota at their word.
Yeah, well, I don't think the solution is to now request states to hand over all information because the Constitution dictates that elections are run by individual states, not Washington. So why do they need to turn over all this information?
That's true up to a point, but are the fate of the who becomes the president over all of us is determined disproportionately by votes in these handful of swing states. Michigan and Minnesota's one of the more important swingier Midwest states. It's not Pennsylvania or Michigan, but it's up there. So it matters a great deal for the rest of the country if they're letting. And they're going to say we're not going to allow the feds to come in and do immigration enforcement. Then the feds are going to say, okay, well then we at least need to see your voter rolls and make sure everyone voting is legal. That does not seem unfair to me at all.
Well, I think when you're looking at immigration and the fact that 2 people have died in a month, and your response when Walz and the president have yet to meet until after she's made these statements. I mean, the president and Walz met.
People died, and now so I don't get to know if the voters are legitimate?
Let me finish. The president and Walz met and had a seemed like amenable conversation to figure out a solution forward. Pam Bondi going on Fox threatening Walz and saying he better respond. That is childish and petty. And now you're conflating every issue you have with Minnesota in your response to the people dying in Minnesota. So that's not a proper response. Like, do you want to get illegal criminals, that you're calling them, out of a state, or do you want to look at the voter rolls? Because if you want to do something else, okay, but you should focus on the action at hand, because you lost 2 lives in a month, American citizens' lives, based on ICE being in the city and the response to that. And we're trying to figure out if that was an appropriate response or overly aggressive response. And your investigation is flawed, blocking out local officials, and you're worried about voter rolls. So it's really like Pam Bondi, as your entire team diminishes.
You can't distract me on this.
I'm not distracting you. I'm saying they're distracting everyone else in the administration who can't handle the problem at hand properly. I don't see how they can switch over to all these other requests and go on TV talking tough, and they can't talk to a person, a leader in person, a local leader.
Well, that's my completely different from you, but problem with Pam Bondi and what she was saying there was like, we sent a letter, and even whoever that was asking that question on Fox was like, is that all you did? And she's like, well, very fluid letter, very powerful letter. And my sense is that conservatives are getting a little fed up with Pam Bondi in particular for being very apt to appear on cable news. She loves being a talking head, that there's not enough action, there's not enough arrest of corrupt figures, there's not enough actual fixing of fraud and voter fraud and things that should be concentrated on. So I think another strongly worded letter to Tim Walz is not going to blow anyone's socks off on the right.
That's a consistent thing that we're seeing across the leadership in the administration. They're all on television right after Renee Good was killed. They're all on television after Alex Preddy was killed, saying incorrect information, going on with these aggressive tones, and nobody's solving the actual problem. So when Walz finally called the president last night, now we have Tom Homan coming in, being the adult in the room, the only one that was on TV, saying that we need to wait until this investigation plays out. And you have a variety of people from Kash Patel on that constantly get on TV
the feds to do
and
independent,
say incorrect information.
You would like the feds to do an independent investigation, I'm assuming, of the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, correct?
Yes.
Handled by the DOJ, correct? Who else would do it?
Yes, and local leaders should be involved.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying for the voter situation. They should be able to investigate whether the people voting in Minnesota are legitimate on the voter rolls.
We'll see what happens.
Up next, President Trump says the DOJ and Congress are investigating Representative Ilhan Omar's skyrocketing net worth. Don't go anywhere. President Trump announced on Monday that the Department of Justice and Congress are, quote, looking at Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar's finances.
In a Truth Social post on Monday, Trump first revealed that he's sending border czar Tom Homan to ease tensions in Minnesota related to Saturday's shooting of ICU nurse Alex Preddy by an immigration officer.
Trump then moved to the subject of investigating the welfare fraud taking place in Minnesota and wrote, the DOJ and Congress are looking at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who left Somalia with nothing. It's now reportedly worth more than $44 million.
Omar shot back at Trump on X, writing, quote, sorry, Trump, your support is collapsing and you're panicking. Right on cue. You're deflecting from your failures with lies and conspiracy theories about me. Years of investigations have found nothing. Get your goons out of Minnesota.
House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer previously told the Post that the goal is to win in court while finding out what caused the big spike in Omar's net worth. Comer added that he was considering subpoenaing Omar's husband, Tim Minett, in a court filing as part of a lawsuit against a related company filed in South Dakota revealed Minett's investment firm, Rose Lake Capital, had $42.44 in its bank account in 2022. 2024, Omar's House financial disclosure showed Rose Lake Capital was worth up to $25 million. It's a nice little payday. However, Ilhan Omar has not disclosed a personal ownership stake in that firm. Well, look, Trump said they're looking at her. I don't know what formal steps are necessarily being taken, nor would I say that an investigation is necessarily proper. I mean, I would think they need more than, wow, she has a lot more money than she used to.
She shouldn't be
It's
rich.
Well, I mean, she would not be the only. Many members of Congress in both parties enriched
Thank
themselves
you.
while in office.
Thank you.
And some of that
Including
is
the president.
Well,
He's
fine.
the most enriched in office.
Well, he was rich to begin with.
I know, but
I think his net worth has
his Trump business
has
is doing
decreased over
extreme
time,
deals
but
that he's saying that his son.
okay,
is
Nancy Pelosi and her husband
She doesn't have
made
nearly
a
as
lot
much
of
money.
money.
As Trump. Carry on though. I don't want to.
Okay, it's the increase during the time in Trump had tons of money before entering politics. Anyway, I don't know that Ilhan Omar has done anything inappropriate here, and so I don't really think there should be an investigation unless there's something a little bit more tangible. I think conservatives should just admit they don't like her. I don't like her either. We don't like her because she seems to hate America, is the reason that she is off-putting. She says a lot of negative things about the country that has brought her in, and it's hard not to have a knee-jerk, well, okay, if you hate America so much, then just go back to Somalia, like, response to the things she says. But I don't know if her wealth was ill-gotten. I don't think it's more ill-gotten than other people in Congress. I favor rules to stop Congress members from stock trading or enriching themselves while they're in office. I favor them. Nancy Pelosi famously fought against them because they would have affected her. So, you know,
So I
it's
think
more about the system than one person.
she was actually investigated before in 2024 under the Biden administration. They looked into her personal finances, campaign spending, interactions with foreign citizens, and they found nothing. It was unsubstantiated. They dropped it. They left it alone. So the fact that she's already looked into under a different administration and the president is just putting it on social media for people to understand that he's looking into her again, he's gaslighting her. He understands that she's already been investigated and there's likely nothing there. But because he has a vendetta against this person, and we know that the president gets politically petty from time to time, he's pointing a light on her and her finances just to try to make things hard for her, as he knows he looks very bad in Minnesota right now.
Well, if James Comer investigates this and does as good a job looking into Ilhan Omar's finances as he did looking into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's shady finances, she has nothing to worry about because he did a terrible job.
Well, she has nothing to worry about because she's denied wrongdoing over and over again, and she's already been investigated and pretty much had nothing that they can go on. So I don't know why we would do this again, but the president likes to waste money and time on political vendettas, so here we are. I hope that you want better for our country. Up next, TikTok users say that posts that were being critical of ICE are censored. I'll discuss that next in my lens.
Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Yeah, so I'm talking about this. When people say this is starting to feel coordinated, they're not being dramatic. They're paying attention. After Alex Preddy was shot and killed by federal immigration personnel in Minneapolis over the weekend, naturally, people turned to social media to air their grievances and thoughts. I mean, it is the second time this month an American citizen has died during a federal immigration operation in that city. Some folks took specifically to TikTok to talk about what happened, and many say their posts were suddenly quiet. Not just a few people either. TikTok users across the country reported that videos mentioning the shooting, ICE or federal enforcement stalled, showed 0 views, or were labeled, quote, ineligible for recommendation. Singer Billie Eilish even posted on Instagram, quote, TikTok is silencing people, by the way, after her brother's video about Preddy's death reached a fraction of his usual audience. Here's what he said in that video.
You've spent 30 years straight telling us that children have to die so that we're allowed to legally carry weapons everywhere in the United States. This guy was being beaten to a pulp on the ground. He didn't draw his weapon.
That video had about 42,000 views, and most of his others easily cleared 10 times that number. That's one example, but if you go on X, you'll see a variety of people with tens of thousands of followers noting that their ICE-related videos got little to no reach compared to their usual audience. Now, TikTok says this was not censorship. The company points out that there were outages at a U.S. data center and says it's been working to restore the service. But here's the problem. This didn't happen in a vacuum. These complaints exploded just days after TikTok finalized a deal to spin off its U.S. business to new investors to avoid a ban in the U.S., a deal that puts the algorithm under the control of a consortium of U.S. companies that include Trump allies like Oracle. Oracle's executive chairman, Larry Ellison, has also assembled a media empire increasingly friendly to Donald Trump. Why does that all matter? Well, because when content critical of federal power, immigration enforcement, or the administration starts disappearing, even temporarily, trust collapses, especially with a younger audience base that already feels watched, throttled, and talked down to. Steve Vladek, a Georgetown law professor, said a video he posted criticizing the Department of Homeland Security was, quote, under review for 9 hours and couldn't be shared still at the time that I wrote this lens. Senator Chris Murphy summed up the stakes bluntly on X, writing, quote, I know it's hard to track all the threats to democracy that there are right now, but this is at the top of the list. And then there's this from Bernie Sanders, who put the bigger picture into one sentence, saying, quote, thanks to Trump, right-wing multi-billionaire Larry Ellison will now control the TikTok algorithm, along with CBS, MTV, the Free Press, BET, CMT, Simon & Schuster, Nickelodeon, Paramount Plus, Pluto TV, and more. This is what oligarchy looks like. Now, whether this was a technical failure, algorithmic chaos, or something more intentional, the damage is the same. People don't trust what they're seeing or not seeing. And in a moment when federal power, immigration enforcement, and democratic norms are already under strain, you have to admit that this is scary.
Yeah, this is an interesting subject. I became aware of this yesterday as well. I'm not active on TikTok, but I saw complaints from people I know who do use the service about throttling of political content. I think it's too soon to know exactly what's going on, if this is just kinks being worked out, but I don't want to be naive, it might be. You're right, I am also concerned that it is a conscious effort by the new owners to crack down on political content. I think that would be deeply bad and also an indictment of, unfortunately, of like America, because we were worried that the Chinese were censoring it, so we took it over, and now we're going to censor it even harder. Because make no mistake, the Chinese did do some censorship on the platform. I remember when you had to refer to COVID, to the coronavirus, as like people found all these ways. Because if you said COVID, they would nuke the post. So you had to say, like, people would say the Panda Express instead of the pandemic. They said Backstreet Boys reunion tour.
Oh, man.
Isn't that funny stuff? I mean, you say unalive instead of suicide if you're talking about suicide on the platform.
And I noticed people will put like stars in their text that seems like it will raise alarms on all social media platforms.
Yeah. But anyway, certainly they should not just nuke political content that the administration or conservatives or whoever, pro-Israel people, don't want discussed. That would be very bad. I don't know that that's what's happening, but I'm certainly not confident that, it was just a mistake. I think, one thing is people will use terms to get around those kinds of filters, or they're just all going to migrate to a different social media site. But this underscores that I didn't think TikTok was enough of a national security issue to justify the federal government doing anything in the first place. If we're going to aggressively force censorship on our own platforms anyway, as the Biden administration did during the pandemic to X and Facebook and YouTube, are we really so much better than this? One of the only cases where I'll make this moral equivalence. Be like, are we even any better than the foreign communist censors if we're doing that too? So this is not good at all.
I just feel like once you have several examples, people should call to question what's going on over at TikTok. I mean, there were people, and I was like, how many is it? Because I know that there's a lot of people that you don't like that were tweeting about how their accounts were shunned,
Right, and I hear this all the
Keith
time, like,
Olbermann,
oh, I'm being
and
shadow
yeah,
banned,
exactly.
I'm being-
and
and
there
there
is
is
some
some
of that,
shadow
right?
banning.
There is some of that,
But sometimes it's
on
like,
the same
sorry,
topic,
this one didn't pop.
right? Across
Sorry.
the board on the same topic, it seems like we should be concerned. And then also, if you look at, and I try to be neutral in regards to Barry Weiss because of her independent media venture and how successful it was and what I think young minds can do for a company. At the same time, we do know that there's been noticeable changes at CBS. I don't know. I feel like it's naive to say that they're not intentional. And so when you know the same group answers to the same owner, Larry Ellison, then you have to be concerned to say, well, if there's changes that immediately happen within months of the takeover of CBS and Paramount, well, there possibly will be changes, even though he's one of many owners now of TikTok. And if this happened on the heels of their takeover, well, naturally people are going to be concerned, especially when you have somebody like one of the most famous celebrities right now, Billie Eilish, who often supports her brother's post that's saying, how do we reach 42,000? Like when we look at the numbers and his last posts are hitting millions, 10 times that, 420,000, then how do we get here?
Yeah, again, hard to know. Could be because of
you have so much grace here. You have so much grace here.
I don't know. They make changes to algorithms, and my social X is really the only one I'm active on in terms of posting political content, and I go through periods where I'm like, am I being suppressed? It's way down. Nobody's seeing what I'm saying. Then I'll go through periods where it's way up again. It's opaque. We don't know exactly what causes it. And yes, sometimes they're nuking things they don't want you to read. Sometimes it's it's being gamed in some reason. I was describing how I think foreign accounts are gaming X's algorithm to some extent. Nick Fuentes is getting gets more likes per second than Elon Musk can even get. And then you're looking and it's all from people who live in Pakistan and it's some bot farm thing. They should really watch out for that. With TikTok, I don't know. I know TikTok much less well because I'm not active on it.
And also the bigger issue is as you continue to censor people for the way that we can still get out video, which is like on YouTube or other apps that are censoring in different kind of ways, if they're all finding their own ways to censor because it's their choice, people are going to rebel anyway and find the content. There's like no way to stop endless content now. We saw that happen with with Israel and Gaza war, right? The content came out about what was happening overseas, which made the public opinion
out on TikTok.
Exactly. But either way, also it was, even though it was to me suppressed on Instagram, it seemed that a lot of accounts.
Right, it makes its way to Instagram.
It makes its way.
Right,
and then it makes
see
its way.
TikTok's content mostly on Instagram.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. You can't. Like it's already out of the bottle. It's already spilled milk. There's nothing that we can do to contain all content, no matter how much you censor it. So I think
that's why I always say these concerns about media consolidation are overblown for exactly that reason.
Well, I think when you still have older people that still do watch traditional television and they're a large voting bloc and they're persuaded by somebody trying to change what was the standard news, like somewhere like CBS, well, that's problematic.
Right. Old people have way
Old
too
people
much
do.
power
They do
over our
vote. Young people
political
should get out and
system,
vote.
and they're confiscating all of our wealth.
I'm not going to go with you down the wealth rabbit hole, but yes, they do vote more than young people, which is a problem. Young people need to get out and vote.
Giving them everything they need, and young people can't afford houses. Up next, Slate magazine is taking heat from conservatives for an opinion piece about Second Lady Usha Vance. I did think it was terrible. Stay with us. Staff writer for Slate, Heather Schwedel, wrote an article on Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance's relationship after the couple announced they are expecting a fourth child earlier last week. The article was titled, "Well, that's one way for J.D. and Usha Vance to respond to the Erica Kirk divorce rumors." Written by Schwedel, starts by talking about the social media chatter surrounding J.D. Vance leaving Usha Vance for Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, which is just a disgusting rumor with no truth to it. While attending a Turning Point USA event at the University of Mississippi in October, J.D. Vance shared a hug, how dare he, with Erica Kirk, which went viral. Schwedel notes that the two were more darkly entertaining than plausible.
Schwedel adds, in lieu of trading in his wife for a paler model, Vance was...
Terrible. Go ahead.
Vance found another way to prove himself a good shepherd of the MAGA faithful. It does make a kind of sick sense that if Vance can't have a white wife standing next to him as he clearly looks towards the 2028 presidential election, the next best thing is a pregnant one. Schwedel mentions Usha's background as being a, quote, highly educated daughter of Indian immigrants. Schwedel suggests that background, Usha not only doesn't burnish Vance's MAGA credentials, she undermines them.
Schwedel also writes that it's so MAGA to have 4 kids. The average number of children per American household has been declining for decades, so having 4 kids in the year 2026 is a bit of a statement.
Schwedel then ended the piece, writing, quote, Usha is free to slap. Did I read that correctly? Usha is free to slap. I had this before JD went crazy. Stickers on her other kids.
Free to slap. I had JD before she went
Oh,
crazy.
got it. I was reading. Okay, Usher is free to slap. I had this before JD went crazy. Stickers on her other kids. But if she could ever claim any kind of ignorance, that time is over. Got it. She has now seen exactly who her husband has become as vice president, and knowing everything she knows, she concluded that yes, she wanted to have another one of JD Vance's babies.
Heather Schwedel got blasted online, deservedly, for some on the right about her views on Vance's relationship and having a 4th kid. Rachel Bovard, VP of Programs at the Conservative Partnership Institute, wrote on X, "This is, and I mean this with utter sincerity, the most gutter, vile, misogynist trash from Slate. This level of bitter nastiness could only come from a woman author, which it obviously did." Political commentator John Podhoretz shared Rachel Bovard's comments on X and wrote, "Holy jamoli, how foul." Yeah, this was just absolutely disgusting.
I mean, this is something that I would expect to see like a TikTok
Trashy.
influencer that was, trying to do like, oh my gosh, he's not with Erica Kirk like you saw online, because those claims were all over the place. Yes.
Nonsense.
So there was a rambling online about the back of the head hug, which had its own life and lived legs on besides a news conversation. The fact that this woman writes for Slate and is trying to write a news opinion piece, this is kind of out of line because
it's all projecting. She's projecting that he wishes he had a white wife, because he wants to run for president, because everyone in MAGA is racist, and so he's having a 4th kid because having more kids is right-wing coded and that's bad, and that's her perspective, which is wrong and bad and flawed and frankly evil in every way. JD Vance, I have no doubt that he loves his wife. I have no doubt that she loves and supports and agrees with him. The liberals get their idea that, these women who are married to these Republican men we don't like, they must just hate everything they're doing and inside be so, torn up about it. No, they agree with and support their husbands. Melania agrees with and supports Donald Trump. She wanted him to run for president. She told him, do it or stop threatening to do it. You got to do one or the other. She supported the idea that she's being held hostage and wants out is an utter fiction created in the minds of liberals, probably liberal women.
When she spends half of the presidency in New York instead of with her husband, people were going to naturally ask questions. I know at the time she was saying she wanted to keep her son in the same school, but historically, wives have moved in with their husbands to the White House and inconveniently moved their kids' schools as well. I'm just saying, okay, so people have questions. I mean, you're in the public eye. You can't.
He likes going back and forth between the 2 places too. He goes back and forth between 3 different places.
I'm happy for Usha, and or Usha, you guys can correct me how to say her name. I'm happy for her. She's having a baby. She's 40 years old. She's a lawyer, smart woman.
Right.
I am very happy for her. I think that that's fantastic if you want to expand your family. I have no criticisms of that. I think when you continuously hear JD Vance, and this is not in defense of the article was trash, but when you have JD Vance who's often criticizing immigrants and elites. I mean, she went to elite school. Her family are literally immigrants. When he's talking about diversity initiatives. She's a product of diversity initiatives. The fact that her family is able to be successful in this country and they're immigrants, and she embodies these stories
by saying she's a product of diversity initiatives.
I'm just saying, you have the opportunity to be looked at as a migrant because we're not just hiring and bringing on our friends, right? This is something that we consider in this country.
You and I just have such a
we have different perspectives on this. I think that you should acknowledge that, right? The fact that people are open to hiring more women, hiring people of different races and colors. They weren't open to that decades ago. Historically, the numbers weren't right. People were actively only hiring men. There was times in this country when women didn't even work. So obviously we've come a long way. So your family as immigrants who came into a growing America have benefited off the policies that we've changed over the last decades to have a more equal society.
I support high-skilled immigration and non-discrimination. So
exactly. So if people are looking at her and saying, oh, well, sometimes your husband says stuff that might directly criticize your family that immigrated here, or diversity initiatives or anything like that, they're allowed to have a criticism or a feeling about it.
Non-discrimination is just, we're going to hire or employ or allow to immigrate or accept to this school the most qualified person regardless of race. That's non-discrimination. Diversity is saying we're going to specifically look for people of a certain identity group because we feel like we don't have enough representatives of that class. That we on the right are all against. The former, we're all for.
Okay,
So,
well, I disagree. You already know that. I don't want to debate DEI right now, but I do want to talk about the fact that she went to was considered an elite college. He criticizes these places all the time. Exactly. So he's running on a stance sometimes that are critical of her experience and his experience. Just like he criticized President Trump for years prior to being his vice president. I mean, this is not consistent. So I do think that he does love his wife because I think maybe he falls more in line with the things that he said historically as opposed to the things that he said the last few years because he wants to be Trump's friend.
I think you could say that elites have had a negative impact to some degree on our public policies as of late, that elite universities have gone awry and there's too much groupthink and too many bad policies, while still saying that, but they are important, they transmit fundamental foundational knowledge about various science and the law, and you need to be educated, and we can still criticize the education system while taking part of it. So I don't know that it's.
But why is it impossible?
Hypocrisy.
I mean, okay, so we both are in committed relationships. There are times when we're going to disagree with our partners. No, that's okay. That doesn't mean I don't respect or love you. Well, for Colin and I, we disagree about a lot of political stuff, and that's okay. But we don't disagree to the point that it's going to deteriorate the relationship. It's like, no, I don't agree with that stance. So
right. Well, they're also allowed to disagree.
They're allowed to disagree too.
But
that piece
I don't know that they really disagree.
That piece doesn't tie into, to me, their political disagreements that may or may not happen behind the scenes.
Sure.
I think that piece was just obnoxious.
That she disagrees with him, and that she's just swallowed her pride or something is just. I think that is a liberal talking and saying, if I was in this situation, I would hate him. I would regret having married him, and so I'm projecting that onto her when there is no evidence whatsoever. It's the same thing they do with Melania. They project onto her that she must hate him and want nothing to do with him. There's no evidence of that.
Well, I think people just are trying
That's how you feel.
People are trying to build a story because they saw that back of head hug, and that was very.
God.
I mean, Robbie, I'm just saying,
like made up.
It just was a very intense hug. That's it. I'm just saying, as a woman, that doesn't mean it means anything. It was an intense hug.
That hug
I don't hug in that way.
Hug bothered me.
No man should. If Colin has a problem if a man's hands are right where JD Vance are on my waist, I'm sorry. If you hug me and go low, then Colin's gonna be like, "What's up with Robbie?" Like, like that's not gonna be acceptable. So I'm just
keep
saying.
Keep that in mind, I guess.
You're gonna go like this on my waist as opposed to a regular hug. What are you saying? Your hands shouldn't go down on this area. Like, what are you? This is like normal questions that people online should have. People who write for news outlets should not ask these questions because they're not rooted in any legitimacy. But people online who go run or muck every day are going to naturally ask these questions.
Okay, we got the back. All right, we got to move on. Up next, Washington Post reporters are publicly asking Jeff Bezos not to lay them off. We'll see how that goes right after this. Washington Post reporters are publicly asking owner Jeff Bezos to save their jobs amid reports of mass layoffs set to hit the company.
Puck News' Dylan Byers reported on X over the weekend that massive layoffs were going to hit the Post. The sports desk could be shuttered entirely, and that foreign desk will get hit hard. Byers then updated his post the next day, saying hundreds were expected to be affected.
Status News, an outlet run by former CNN reporter Oliver Darcy, also reported that sources said up to half of the newsroom could be cut. These reports appear to have prompted a bunch of X posts from some of the outlet's own reporters. For instance, Ukraine Bureau Chief Siobhan O'Grady writes, "Hi, Jeff Bezos. We will never forget your support for our essential work documenting the war in Ukraine, which still rages. Your wife has called our team badass beacons of hope. We risk our lives for the stories our readers demand. Please believe in us," and #SaveThePost. And then Middle East correspondent Loveday Morris wrote, "Today a source warned me my reporting lines could have me killed. Just an average day as a foreign correspondent. I can't count the number of times I've come under fire or had windows rattle from blasts. Our international staff risks so much to bring home the news. Save the Post."
Now, the news of the layoffs prompted reaction on X. Co-founder of Democratic think tank Third Way wrote, quote, "Jeff Bezos has $250 billion. The Post, even if it hemorrhages money, is utterly irrelevant to his net worth. Why is he killing one of the few remaining major American newspapers? Why?"
And in response to a report from Brian Stelter, where a source told him that there's a sense across the newsroom neither Bezos nor Will Lewis are good stewards of the paper, Editor of Commentary Magazine John Podhoretz writes, Bezos isn't a steward, he's an owner. Lewis isn't a steward, he works for Bezos. Newspapermen are often comical in their inability to see the difference between the views they hold of their own importance and the fact that they are not important. I worked for newspapers for 35 years. This
wasn't on my bingo card that he would buy the Post and then let it start to deteriorate.
He bought it years and years and years and years ago, and he has decided to take a different direction with it. He's prescribed that the editorial vision will be aligned with his views, which are for civil liberties and free markets, libertarian, classical liberalism, my own views. So I'm glad to have a newspaper that's going to be in favor of them. I'm sad for people in my industry and any other that if they lose their job, mass layoffs are never fun, but the media industry is changing, and if he has a different vision for what the Post should be doing, he's going to implement it, and it's his paper, and he wants to do something else. He's not obligated to contribute more of his money to prop up a business that is not working or that he wants to change in some way. So, again, I am sad for people. I'm sad for people on the foreign desk that they do terrific work. Sports commentary isn't really my jam, but they do great reporting too. But, it's a national paper, and maybe he wants it to be more of a DC-focused paper. Maybe he wants it to do more commentary on, I think, economics and domestic issues. It's his right. It's his paper.
Yeah, I think two things. As a journalist and somebody who's been in positions at local newspaper and local news, to see people losing their job in this time when they're competing with the digital space and all these channels that are popping up, fast channels, everything, it's really hard to convince advertisers that you're worth spending money, especially when you're a print paper that's in the digital world. And so I understand on the one hand why this economically doesn't make sense to keep going the way that it has been. But on the other hand, I think that Jeff Bezos has the resources to be creative enough to figure out how to get these people's voices and ideas and stories still to the ethos without maybe doing it the traditional standard way as opposed to just letting everybody go. I don't think we should keep people that are not effective. I don't think everybody should keep their job like a participation trophy. But I do think for the people that have shared the tweets that they are actually doing the hard work that they're saying they're doing and have had accolades from his wife, and their reporting has gone to break records and open eyes of people. They should be given opportunities to still have their work hit the masses. And Jeff Bezos has the resources to make that happen.
It's an indictment of their work, even from the Post perspective. I think a lot of these people are doing great reporting. It's just the media is transforming, and they want to use that money elsewhere internally in the Post, and that's just the way. Maybe they want to do more video commentary. We're all selling newspapers is hard. We've moved online. We've moved toward video over the written word. That's why over the course of my career, over the last 20 years, I've learned into doing more video because that's where the eyeballs are now. That's where the interest is. So they're realizing that as well. That does it for us on Rising Live. Thanks so much for watching, and look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel so that you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Ye, the former rapper known as Kanye West, took out an ad in the Wall Street Journal to write a lengthy apology for his past anti-Semitic comments.
Ye has been mired in controversy because of his comments for several years. In 2022, he praised Adolf Hitler on Alex Jones' podcast. And last year, he released shirts with swastikas on them and released a song titled Heil Hitler. Okay, now the 24-time Grammy Award winner is trying to make amends, says many of his inflammatory remarks actually stem from mental health problems that were caused by bipolar disorder. In the letter, he writes in part, I lost touch with reality. Things got worse the longer I ignored the problem. I said and did things I deeply regret. Some of the people I love the most, I treated the worst. I regret and am deeply mortified by my actions in that state and am committed to accountability, treatment, and meaningful change. It does not excuse what I did, though. I am not a Nazi or an anti-Semite. I love Jewish people.
Ye believes his bipolar disorder can be attributed to a brain injury that he suffered from a car accident more than 20 years ago. He says that brain injury was never properly diagnosed until 2023. As for his bipolar disorder, he says he was diagnosed with that in 2016, and he's often discussed the condition in interviews and in his music.
He ends the letter by saying he's doing better now and hopes he can eventually earn people's forgiveness. Social media lit up with reactions to the apology on Monday. Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, writes, I don't speak for the Jewish community, only for myself. Kanye West's apology is unusually moving and deeply self-reflective. Bipolar depression is a brutal illness. Perhaps anti-Semites like Carlson, Owens et al., presumably without a medical excuse, will try some self-reflection. Former DNC chair Donna Brazile says Ye should place this ad everywhere, starting with black-owned publications. While there's more to discuss, this letter is incredibly revealing. Hate and other forms of bigotry have no place in the United States or anywhere else in the world. We must come together.
But of course, there were others who remain skeptical and aren't ready to forgive the rapper just yet. Writer Danny Gold says, quote, he was doing this stuff way before 2025 and basically paved the way for Nick Fuentes with a massive celebrity endorsement. Kanye opened the floodgates in the early 2020s for what we're seeing now. Not good enough. I think we have to start with the elephant in the room. Kanye West has an album coming out.
Yeah.
And this is right before his album release, and he generally does some type of apology, sits down with somebody right before an album. And so that's my critical eye looking at this. And then on the other side of it, I do think that he's allowed to share his perspective, and apology is a good first start. I think he offended a lot of people, including the Jewish community, including the black community, back from when he went on TMZ talking about slavery was a choice. You know, I think that he said a variety of things that have been deeply offensive to a variety of people. But mental illness doesn't always explain a behavior. And sometimes when we conflate the two and say, oh, this shooter was mentally ill, or this person was, it's like, okay, mental illness does not make you racist. And so we need to make sure
I disagree
that
with
we
that.
are,
It does.
It makes you racist?
Yes, it absolutely
I don't think that. I think
No,
that we
it's-
need to
go
not
ahead.
stigmatize all mental illness and say that turns, there's plenty of people that are mentally ill that are not racist.
Well,
And so
I
don't
didn't
think
say it makes-
is a, you said it makes you racist.
I didn't say all mentally ill people are racist, but if you go to a treatment center for mentally ill people, or you spend any time with mentally ill people, if you're on the street and see a mentally ill person, they will often be muttering racial slurs or obscenities against women or gay people or Jewish people or what. In fact, mentally ill people do borrow the language of hate and conspiracy from popular culture. That's why they're not yelling gobbledygook. They're yelling slurs and crazy things about the Jews or about black people or about white people. I mean, that's what you hear when you interact with mentally ill people. I'm not saying that's, some people say like, oh, well, you're still responsible. So it's not, you can still say they're responsible because a lot of mentally ill people, there's a responsibility to take medicine that makes you not psychotic. If you take antipsychotic medicine, which may be the case with Kanye West, that when he's medicated, he is perfectly sane and understands the harm that he has caused to people, and then he goes off his med. This is like saying, you know, if you're a problem drinker, you shouldn't drink. And if you do drink, you really shouldn't get behind the wheel of a car. And if you do that, you can't say, well, it's not my fault, I'm an alcoholic. It's still your fault. So there's still plenty of moral blame we can place on people who act in a racist or otherwise harmful way when they're mentally ill. But the idea that like mental illness correlates with adapting and using language that is offensive for that reason. So I push back on that part.
Well, I think that, you know, I will acknowledge that the fact that when he got in that 2002 car accident, he had a lot of loss in his life after that, lost his mother, could have not been diagnosed properly. 2002 to 2026 is a lot of time for doctors to have new realizations about his mental health and his state altogether. So to find out this diagnosis in 2023 is fine, but I think that he needs to do a lot more atoning. This is one first step, but if we see some album rollout where he's now back on top and then goes back to his antics, and he paid a lot of money to take out this Wall Street Journal ad. It's not like a cheap thing to take out a full page spread. He wanted to do it in a way that no one could really push back, right? You can't write comments under the article. You can write them online, but the article exists in the paper and everybody reported on it. So he kind of got his version out and left it there. Didn't have pushback from an interviewer, just left it there. So we'll see what his next steps are. I think there's a lot of follow-up that needs to be done. He offended a large group of people, and so blaming it on mental health illness is what he wants to do, but the next steps are really important to see how sincere he is.
Right. Yeah. So let me be clear here. I accept and believe that he is mentally ill. I do. I think he has manifested many times over the years that he is a disturbed mentally ill person. That could be from genetics. That could be from this car accident. It could be from both factors or a variety of factors. I also think he has just been an ass on many occasions, and maybe that is attributable to the mental illness. But again, there's some responsibility you have, especially when you're someone who is so wealthy and has so many resources that they can take advantage of to help them cope with mental illness, including staying medicated and getting the appropriate help. So it's not, I think it is true that he's ill, but is not an excuse for his behavior. So he was right to apologize. I also don't think it means you should not appreciate his music if you happen to be a huge fan of his. I think you should separate art and artist. I have never been a particular fan of his music or really anything he's ever done, so I don't claim any ownership over
the
him.
college dropout?
I'm not a fan. I'm not against you if you are a fan. It's just not my thing. That's fine.
That was a classic album.
Yeah, I'm not for me. It's fine. I wish him well, and apologizing is a good thing to do. And if his behavior is really good from here on out, I think it would be the right thing to show him to accept the apology and extend some grace toward him. He's been through a lot. But if it is just a stunt and he's going to be well behaved right now because the album's coming out, and then go back to being crazy because he's not taking good care of himself, that will be an indictment.
And we all would have fall for it if his album
Yeah.
goes #1 and then he comes back out and nothing really changes. So I'm interested to see. Also, before we go, what do you think about the claims that he is like the catalyst for people like Nick Fuentes?
Yeah. I mean, he does. He absolutely has some responsibility for elevating Fuentes in particular because they had some friendship, and he brought him, like, Kanye met with Trump, they had dinner with Trump, and he brought Fuentes to the dinner, and Trump had no idea who it was. And so that was a bringing, elevating of someone who it would have been better had that person not been elevated. Now, Nick Fuentes is also very talented and has been successful on promoting his own show on social media, and, now I think is being promoted by foreign interests, but is also a compelling figure. I think his views are on many issues, particularly on racial issues and Jewish issues, are reprehensible, but he might very well have succeeded on his own too. So I'm not sure it can all be pinned on Kanye, personally.
All right, still to come. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is under fire from the Holocaust Museum for a comparison he made between ICE operations and Anne Frank. We'll be right back.
The Holocaust Museum is scolding Governor Tim Walz after he referenced Anne Frank while discussing ICE operations in the state of Minnesota.
During his press conference on Sunday, the governor compared the story of Anne Frank to children of Minnesota who he says are hiding from ICE agents. Let's watch.
We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
Walz continued by once again urging President Trump to remove immigration agents from the state, suggesting that he is the only one with the power to bring the turmoil and violence to an end. However, the governor's comments were not received well by the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. The museum's X account put out a statement saying, quote, Anne Frank was targeted and murdered solely because she was Jewish. Leaders making false equivalencies to her experience for political purposes is never acceptable. Despite tensions in Minneapolis, exploiting the Holocaust is deeply offensive, especially as anti-Semitism surges.
Online, other people also ripped the governor, calling the comparison insensitive. Writer Alex Zeldin says, you can talk about the state wrongfully executing Americans exercising their First Amendment rights without invoking the Holocaust. Our dead relatives are not your political prop. Please find another metaphor.
However, there was another side to the conversation, with some defending Walz and taking issue with the Holocaust Museum statement. Content creator and producer Jeremy Hecht writes, quote, growing up Jewish, I was taught my whole life to never forget. It's crazy how some people think that only applied to us and not every tragedy going on in the world.
I think it was an overheated comparison. You can disagree with what immigration authorities are doing. I certainly disagree with it, at least to some degree. They are not deliberately targeting people for murder, which is what took place at the Holocaust. That was an attempt to vaporize an entire ethnicity. This is the deportation of people who entered the country illegally. Criminals are being sent to some pretty bad conditions, prisons, CCOT, but otherwise, the illegal immigrants are being deported to their home countries. This is not, again, I'm not saying I support it, but to just immediately go, oh, this is like what Hitler was doing, weakens the potency of that analogy and cheapens the unique horror of that historical event. So I would definitely be with the Holocaust Museum, to just not use that one. Also then, okay, but even Tim Walz doesn't believe it's that serious because he is now negotiating with Trump to do it so they'll just do deportations of some people. That would be like, so he's negotiating with the SS is what he's doing in his metaphor? I don't think he thinks that.
Well, I think some schools were closed and people probably were uncomfortable. And so I think that he's actually leaning on a true feeling, but that doesn't mean you need to relate it to the Holocaust. There are still survivors and descendants of people that were affected by the Holocaust alive right now. And so every time that we continue to use this as a reference, both on the Republican side of the aisle and the Democratic side of the aisle, it's inappropriate. I bring it up when every day we hear fascists from different people calling it out and pointing to each other. I think we can do better, and we can just say this is not how our democracy should look. We should want better. It doesn't take too much courage to say that ICE killing Americans is not the road that we'd like to go down. And I think you can firmly say that. And the rest of his press conference, which I used in my lens earlier this week, was firm and adamant as a leader, but every time you want to bring in and exacerbate and discuss in relation to a new incident, the experience that the Jewish community had, I think that is improper correlation. We can just talk about this moment now, and it might go down in history books about how it was all handled, but it certainly doesn't need to be compared to another moment that was an egregious part of our history. It's like, every time people are like, oh, something slavery, it wasn't as bad as slavery. That doesn't make any sense. So the comparison doesn't make sense. And I think you can say words like, okay, we're taking an authoritarian drift. We need to be careful of our democracy, hold our leaders accountable, look over federal officials, but you don't have to say, this is the Holocaust, Trump is a Nazi. That, like, every time, it's exhausting. It's
set
exhausting.
Up camps to gas millions of people and then burn their remains. Like, this isn't anything on that same level.
Right. But I think that said, when we look at history in 10 years and look back on this moment and see some of the places that people are being held that are considered criminal, we're not sure that every single person there is a criminal, but they're being held in these detention camps. The environments, from what I see on social media, does not look adequate for humanity and humane conditions. And so part of that is we're going to be critical when we look back of, like, is this the best job that we could have done with immigration? I think we'll look at the last 10 years and wonder what could have been handled better and how there could have been more bipartisan work with both parties to figure out how to solve this in a different way that treated people humanely. And I think that that's probably what Walz was getting at. And then he just went, too far with the comparison to prove a point. But it is very contentious there. I mean, he's watching American citizens die twice in a month. And so you saw Fry and when he had his press conference cursing everybody out. Like, I think everybody is truly heightened. So that's why I'm happy that they had a conversation, President Trump and Governor Walz, because hopefully we can stop getting on TV with what can be looked at as performance or actual anger, and we can actually get to the root of fixing some of the issues in the state.
Yeah, I hope Democrats are finally ready to participate in that effort, which they haven't been, and which is why this massive federal intervention and crackdown happened. If they would just agree to detain and then hand over illegal immigrants who have been detained because they've committed other crimes, there would be no need for any of this. Well, that's all that was being asked for.
You know what? If the president would have called Walz, like Walz decided to call him yesterday, maybe they could have discussed this before he bombarded the state and the city with federal authorities. The default is be presidential.
Not the order of events.
No.
They declared it a sanctuary city. They said
when Biden was president,
not participate with national law enforcement on immigration on any level whatsoever.
And so did Mamdani. And guess what? He had a conversation with President Trump, and they have an amicable relationship. So a conversation is always worth having, I think, before sending the federal forces inside of a state and 2 Americans being killed. You could point fingers all day, but I don't think that's any solution. To say, oh, you made it a sanctuary. Okay, you guys are voted in office. You're not ordained with the crown to lead. So please lead. Pick up the phone. I don't care who started it. This is very childish to say, well, if Democrats would have. No, here we are. You have to solve it now. It is to say, okay, here we are. People died. And so is that the solution that people want?
Republicans are trying to get them to reverse that policy. A policy that was fine, and then they did something, and then they upped it to non-compliance. And this is what non-compliance looks like.
Well, then, you know what? Conversations are the first start. Legislation is the second start. But going in there and just bombarding a state that doesn't want your intervention, and then 2 Americans dying within a month is certainly not the outcome that we were looking for. I think you can agree with that.
I do agree with that. We have a lot more to talk about on Rising. Please stay with us.